Let me give answers first to each of them, and then we'll go through. How's that? That way I know that I don't get rabbit trailed. Should men not wear hats or cover their heads in church? I think that's also up to the individual. So I would say those first two questions are up to the individual. Should women not have short hair and men not have long hair? I think that also is up to the individual. Yeah. So now, because I know that the idea of short and long hair does come into the passage we'll look at. So there's my answers. Do you have any different answers than I have?
So I'll be completely honest. I'm going to defer to Rob and my dad, who I think have essentially the same beliefs. However, I think that they come to those beliefs in different ways. So my father wrote an article on this. This is what I'll say about this. I haven't studied this enough to have to argue it one way or the other. My father wrote an article on this, and I would reference this article. The article is called "Should I Remove My Kippah?" This was written a long time ago, maybe back
20 years, maybe. I don't know.
More than that, I think. I think this was written back in the early 90s because people at the church that my father was pastoring were wondering why he was wearing a kippah, and it was a source of soreness for the people at the church. And so my father wrote this article. This is what my father says. I'll read his conclusion, and then I will pass it to Rob, and Rob can take it from there. This is what my father says in his conclusion. By the way, this is offered for free on TorahResource. You can find it in the article section. Should I remove my kippah? If you type in kippah into the search bar anywhere on the site, you will find this article. Okay. This is what he says in his conclusion. Conclusion. Paul is not referring to head coverings in this passage. As such, he was not requiring the congregation at Corinth. By the way, before this, he goes through a lot of the language to come to this conclusion. So I would certainly refer you to this article. As such, he was not requiring the congregation at Corinth to abandon the Jewish tradition for men to cover their heads when praying. He was, however, reinforcing a Jewish perspective on the husband-wife relationship in which the wife receives a position of authority in the community by virtue of her marriage relationship. He also was stressing the importance of marking the distinction between male and female and the God-given roles each is to perform within the believing community. So that is what, thank you, Mike, for posting the URL to the article in the chat room. You can see it there for anyone who is interested. That is my father's conclusion. I will pass it now to Rob.
You know, we were just talking about that word, to'eva, which is that word abomination. And one of the ones is, let me just scroll through here. It's sometimes translated detestable, something like that. But where I accidentally scrolled too far. Well, Deuteronomy 22:5 is one. A woman shall not wear a man's clothing, nor shall a man put on women's clothing. For whoever does these things is a to'avat Adonai, it says, an abomination to the Lord your God. So that's just one example. So, yeah, there's a lot to talk about with this 1 Corinthians 11. I agree. I think that there is something going on in Corinth that is, there's two elements. There's the popular Corinthian culture, which we don't know much about. And so speculating too much can be problematic. We just what is Paul's point here? Paul is taking us through, starting from the beginning of 1 Corinthians 11, through a kind of reasoning construction based on this fact. And the fact is what he says in verse 3, Christ is the head of every man. This is the NASB 1995. Christ is the head of every man. Man is the head of a woman, and God is the head of Christ. Okay, so he puts that on. But then from 4, in my reading, from 4 through 10, because of the angels, is not Paul's opinion. He's describing a rationality that he is encountering in Jewish communities that are saying that the women need to have some kind of hair covering because of angels. And that men are not, because man is over woman, somehow man does not have that same constraint that the women have. They're not susceptible to this. And I think Paul agrees. He says, yeah, it does look like, God made man first, etc. He made woman out of man. And there seems to be this Genesis scriptural foundation. But then in verse 11, he says, however, and that's that word plain in Greek. And I take that to mean he's basically saying this. I understand why people come up with this construction, but he says, however, in the Lord, ... And then he offers a Yeshua-oriented reading of the same passages from Genesis. And then he says, all things come from God. And you need to judge locally. You need to make this, there's an important judgment you need to make yourselves as your community.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Tell us your thoughts on this subject by leaving a comment in the comment section. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and enable those notifications. And we'll see you in the next video.